Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to connect Flask with a database. For this demonstration I'm going to try connecting with an SQLite database using Flask SQLAlchemy library. First of all, I'm going to create a new project. SQLite Alchemy. And then I'm going to create a new virtual environment. I have created a new virtual environment. I'm going to open this project in Python. I'm going to open the project and select the project which I have just created. The project is now open in Python. We'll start creating with requirements.txt file. Here the interpreter is not yet configured. Maybe I will just configure an interpreter. I'm going to select the existing environment which we just created using the command prompt. Now the interpreter is configured. I'm going to start installing the required packages for this demonstration. Obviously we are going to start with using Flask and then SQLAlchemy and then an integration library to integrate the Flask and SQLAlchemy, which is Flask-SQLAlchemy, and that's it. These are the required libraries. Maybe we'll install these packages required. Packages are successfully installed. First off, I'm going to start by creating an app.py file. I will first create with a minimal Flask API and then start configuring and interacting with the database. As a minimal application, I'm going to create an app for Flask. And then an init script. App.run. We'll run it in the debug mode. Then we'll create a sample route. We have created a sample route and then start this application and test it using Postman. The development server has been started. We will now test this API endpoint using the Postman script. I have Postman open. Localhost 5000. And I got the response as intended. So the Flask minimal application is now up and ready. Now we'll go ahead start configuring the database. We need to create a database in variable db as the app. And now we'll create the database URI configuration for the SQLite database. As we are going to use an SQLite, we just going to set the database URI, which is sufficient. Whereas if we have to use any other database, we need to correspondingly set those config variables. Increase the font size. Increase the font size. Okay, so here database URI, which is supposed to be SQLite protocol, and the file name. I'm going to demonstrate with the to-do API endpoints. We will create an initial model, to-do class model, which inherits database.model class. The table contains to-do db.column integer. This is going to be our primary key. We need to initialize it with dbsql. And then another column, description, which holds the description of the task. And then the status column, which holds the status of the to-do. Going to be either completed or not, just a true or false status. We have defined the model for the table, and to create the database table, what we have to do is, like in our initialization logic, we need to just create the tables using the command db.createAll. And then now we will start adding routes for interacting and accessing this table which we are going to just create, and then add or remove records from this table. First, we will create a route to list the database tables to do records from this table. That route to do, and the method which we are going to allow is a get method, which going to get the list of available to do, and a post method which will be used to add a to-do list. The request method is going to be get. This request is for getting the list of to-dos. Now we need to write the statement for querying the records from the table. Here I am going to use SQLAlchemy Expressions specifically for querying and interacting with the database. First we will write the select to-do list. I'm going to select todo.todo_id, todo.description, and todo.status. We can create an alias object for the todo and use it as a shorthand operator. However, here in my case, the name todo itself is a shorthand, so I'm going to use it straightly. And I'm going to just write the select statement. Select the to-do list, an array of column names, and select from to-do table. Now we have to execute this statement through db.session.execute select. Since this is going to return a list of records, we should use fetch all and assign it to the result. Okay, the result object will contain the row proxy, which we have to convert it into a dictionary to respond it to the user, which we will do it now. Like to do result, I'm going to convert it into a dictionary list of dictionary. To do for to do in select to do, and then respond this. Personify this string, this dictionary. Yes, we have completed the selecting all to do API. We will run this again. And we'll query it from the Postman. Yes, we have got an empty records. It was because we still haven't added any records in the table. Now start adding the start processing the post request to add records into the database. It will be an else if condition here. Request.method equal to post, which means we have to process this request for adding records. As this is going to be an insert statement, we'll surround it with try catch block. Insert to do dictionary. We are going to create it a dictionary object. So what we are going to do is we will be taking an input of just the description of this table, of this column. To do ID will be auto populated as we are inserting the records, and the status we need to set it to false initially. So what we will do is we'll set the status to false, and then we'll write the statement insert to do values is going to be the dictionary which we have just created. Insert to do dict. This assign it to an variable and then pass it to the execute command. Execute insert to do statement. once the statement is executed, we need to commit it. Now we'll handle the except block, except SQLAlchemy error. We will roll back the session and re-raise the error exception back to the caller. If required, we can handle it here. Now if the logic has passed this except block, which means that the insert has been successfully completed and record has been inserted. Now we will return the status to the user that the record has been successfully inserted. Respond and dictionary successfully added the task. Yeah, and that is it. Now what we will do, we will test this logic to add records. We'll go to the Postman and we'll open a new request tab. The URL is same, however it is going to be a post, and then we need to pass the request body, which is going to be in JSON. I'm going to pass only the description. Finish this task. This would be the name of the task. I'm calling the API and I have got the response, successfully added the task. Now I go back to the listing API and see if I am getting this newly added record. Yes, now I've got the newly added record. Finish this task with status as false and the to-do ID which has been auto-assigned is 1. Now we'll try to add another task. Finish this another task and add it, and we got the response, successfully added the task. We go back to the listing API and see if the newly added task has appeared. Excellent. Now we have these 2 records in your SQLite database. Now we will go ahead and add API for interacting with the individual to-do list. Okay, so to interact with an individual to-do list, what we have to do is, like, we need to get the to-do ID in the route parameter URL itself. The way we need to define it is like app.route/to-do, which is our initial route, and further we need to add the route query, the URL parameter to-do ID, which is the ID which will be interacting with in this particular route. And the supported methods are to get the specified to-do ID, and then put method to update the to-do based on the ID, and then delete method to delete the to-do ID. Now we can start with the definition to do underscore ID. This is the URI. This is the to-do ID which we are going to get from the to-do query itself, URL itself. We will first define the methods. If request.method is equal to get, which means the get request. Here the query is almost same as get all get all to-dos, which I'm just going to copy and modify it a little bit. To-do statement, select from to-do. I need to add a condition where to-do ID is equal to the ID which I have just passed in here. And the other change we need to do is, like, instead of fetch all, we need to modify it to fetch one to get single item. As this result now is going to be just a single node of row proxy, we just directly convert it into a dict. Select to do dict is equal to dict of select to do result, and then we can just return the dictionary. Okay, we'll now test this get API to the Postman. I'm just going to copy this URL and open as a new Postman tab. To do / the ID. I'm going to pass the ID 1 to get the details of 1. And now we have received a single item here. If we wanted to get the to do ID of ID 2, we can just pass it here. Here we can do another validation, like if we pass an ID which is not available in the database, probably we can check and respond error, like if this value is null, exception that to do ID found. I'm going to come here and test with an ID 3 which is not there in the table, and I have received an exception. Maybe instead of just sending an exception, probably I will return a status message itself, like return status, this one. Okay, now we can test this again. Okay, now we got the status response that the to do with ID 3 was not found. If I going to check for to do ID with 2, I got the response correctly. Now we will add another API to update the to do record, for which I'm going to use the method put. Method is equal to put. Here what I'm going to expect as a request body for this particular statement is either the user can update the description or the status of the to do itself. So the user may pass of the two values. So I'm setting it as an update dictionary, update to do dict, which is going to be from the request.json. Here I am directly using the JSON from the request object, which ideally we shouldn't, which is a bad security practice. As a standard security practice, we need to validate the input whatever we are getting through the request body and then consume it. We shouldn't directly use it. Here, just to keep it simple and to demonstrate, I haven't validating this input as such. and then we'll write the update query, update to do dot values update to do dict, where to do dot id is equal to do dot underscore id. Update to do statement. Now we need to execute this statement, db.session.execute update to do statement. We need to surround this logic with the try catch block. So we execute it and then db.session.commit. Case of exception, SQLAlchemy error, we roll back the transaction and then raise error. And finally, we'll respond the status saying that code has been updated successfully. To do with ID updated successfully. Okay, we'll test this section of our code. Going to the Postman, let me copy one of this value and pass it in the body. So format to ID and put. It's a put. This is going to be a put query. I need not have to pass the ID here. So say for example, now I wanted to just update the status from false to true. I'm just going to pass this one. And I've got the success response saying that to do with ID2 updated successfully. Now let's go back to the listing API and see if the update has been successful. You can see here the status changed to true. Now let me try to update the description of the task 1. Task 1 and then the description. Description is finish this task. Finish this task. Updated. To call this API, and I have received a success response saying that the to do with ID 1 updated successfully. Now we'll go back to the listing API and see the description got updated. However, the status is still false. Okay, now we have successfully updated the record. We can now move on to an API to delete the record, to-do record from the table. We'll go back to the PyCharm IDE and then start implementing the method delete. Else if request.method is equal to delete. Again, I'm going to surround this with the try catch block. So delete statement will be delete to do where to do id is equal to do underscore id, and then we just have to execute the statement, commit it, and in case of exception roll back and re-raise the exception. I'm just going to copy it. Okay, I need to just update the status response. Deleted successfully. Okay, Now we will test this API with Postman. I'm going to create a new Postman tab, and this method is going to be delete. I'm going to delete the first to-do ID. I have received the status response saying the to-do with ID deleted successfully. Now we can verify it using the listing API, and you can now see that we get only one item, which is the to-do ID 2, as the to-do ID 1 was deleted. And this is how we have to write SQLAlchemy expression for performing or interacting with the database table. Though here in this case I have demonstrated with an SQLite table, the code just work with any other database, relational database. We only have to modify the configuration parameters to point to the corresponding database, and everything else will just work. Hope this video might have helped you, and thanks for watching.